Hello, my name is Dr. Alys Mendus, and this is my presentation, A Job for Me and a School for My Future Children, troubling your own assumptions on education, parenting, and the academy through autoethnographic poetry. I acknowledge and pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples past, present, and emerging. I recognise that the sovereignty of the land on which I am on was never ceded and that it remains Aboriginal land. I wrote this presentation whilst living on Wadawurrung country, Victoria, Australia. Let's start with Alys, the PhD student, in 2017. I visited over 180 schools educating differently to mainstream education in 23 countries, searching for the ideal school. I was looking for a job for me and a school for my future children. I was in a space full of hope, excited to visit a new, innovative school. I couldn't let go that there must be an ideal school somewhere, ignoring the elephant in the room. I know what you're all thinking. What do you mean when you say ideal school? Isn't that an oxymoron? Many of these places educating differently still fit our neoliberal society. Sometimes I can look a bit deeper to find some gems to play with, to chuck into the melting pot of revolution towards the utopia that needs a paradigm shift, a societal change to occur. These glimmers and gems are my education. A new school that combined all these gems is not the answer, as all the gems are temporal. They are temporal because a gem is for and from a specific time and place, country and educational setting, and they are often not generic concepts or approaches. However, more importantly, my arguments support Gray's conclusion that you can make changes or share stories of the gems, but this does not solve the problem that the current places of learning or schools are just not suitable. It must also be made clear that the gems are a compromise, as they are, in my opinion, what shines in this specific time, mostly in neoliberal countries around the world, but not the answer, as I'm now aware that the current world, the ideal school just does not exist. I argue that school and schooling are not the answer. Perhaps home education is the only current possibility, as it would provide full autonomy to the family. But the choice of home education raises challenges of inequalities and privilege. For it is an entanglement of education, a radical non-binary approach that draws on the current strengths, the gems, but dreams for the future, for the visions of the not yet thought, made possible by giving young people the freedom to fly, and to de-school teachers and de-school the system and chuck out not just the word school, but the institution itself. For there is no ideal school. A school is not the answer. Now, Alys the academic and Alys the parent. Post-PhD, I did become a parent and begin work as a casual academic online due to COVID. Now trapped in a position of training pre-service teachers to work in a system I had completely lost faith in. I wrote a book from my PhD in 2021 to make sense of it all and share my autoethnographic story with others. School is not the answer, I called out. My baby became a toddler, restrictions were lifting, and I began to run an outdoor Steiner playgroup. I critiqued all teaching pedagogies, but I was also a parent and needing to parent my child. Steiner Waldorf early childhood approaches surround the child in love, magic, and beauty, that the world is good, and in the early 2020s I felt that was much needed. I continued working at 4 different Australian universities in education and teaching and research. My child grew, and we attended Steiner playgroups, then kindergartens. I kept running Steiner outdoor playgroups. I remembered how much I loved working with young children, the capability and agency and all-knowingness of a 3-year-old as they explore the world re-enchanted me. During my PhD, I came to a point where I said, I do not want to be a teacher, the learned one, inputting knowledge, gaming some sort of power trip. I'm no longer defining myself as a teacher, having researched myself out of a job. Yet, here I was, in a Steiner kindergarten, and running playgroups and parenting a young child, and loving this moment in my life. I reread my words from my PhD. Hopefully, I will not need to be Alys, the traditional mainstream teacher again. But I doubt I can be now, as I bring so many stories with me, even if I step foot into a traditional mainstream classroom. It has allowed me to realise that my future is not as a school teacher. After completing my PhD, and when my child was very young, people would often ask me for advice about what school they should send their kids to. And I said, I can offer some of my own thoughts for my future children that I still like Steiner kindergarten and collective home education unschooling. But for many people, asking me for advice, that isn't really what they're looking for. So perform school tourism, I answer. Anyone can be a school tourist. Performing school tourism is the answer. It does not even need to be about educating differently. It is about your own inner journey, the embodied feelings you get from visiting schools, I explain. How do I go about performing school tourism, they asked. Find out what is an offer in your area. What is your budget, beliefs, and then visit places and see what feels right for your children and family, I reply. Of course, this still assumes a level of privilege and social capital to not send your child by default to the local state school. But for those asking, I'm beginning to have some answers. And for those not aware, then I say, read my book, talk more, look around, see what's out there. Maybe not just the first school you go to. Now, parenting, home educating, and flexi schooling. During my child's early childhood, I stayed true to my convictions. COVID helped. I worked from home. My partner did too, planning Zoom meetings around nap time and nursing. We lived our own quiet, separate lives, adding in a few playgroups and library singing sessions. Time passed. Our child grew. We continued our itinerant lives. An option of one morning a week in a remote Steiner ward of kindergarten arose. We drove an hour. I assisted the teacher, covered when she was sick. I slid comfortably into the role and back into the Steiner world. We were technically now home educating, as we were in the UK, but we felt like we were just living life. Back in Australia, now in a different state, we kept living life. A bush kinder option appeared. Then over time, a part-time kindergarten options, and then part-time grade 1. Part-time school, flexi school, at a place educating differently to mainstream, still just about supported my thesis, but so did listening to our child. At 4, they'd announced that they were going to get different parents that sent them to school, so much was their need for the concept of school. Over time, we found ways that met all our needs, but it still feels unsatisfactory. As I argued in my book, Steiner Ward of Schools may be alternative, but they are still schooling my child to conform. There may be no uniform and teachers are called by their first names, but behaviour is still managed. My recent academic work has focused deeply on diversity and inclusion, and I have clear ethics on LGBTQIA inclusive spaces and educating to create an environment for all children to have space to explore who they are. Stepping back into the teacher mould has been unsettling, and I felt outspoken and out of place. The state of Victoria in Australia has clear education policies on teaching respectful relationships, including gender fluidity and identity beyond the binary. However, when approaching a school to do cover teaching work, I was asked not to talk about gender diversity. So I'm left cross and angry, having fallen out of a conservative principal. I'm reminded that really I cannot be a school teacher again. I do not want to conform. Perhaps I need to be a principal, or back to my old plans to start my own school community learning project. I already run a home ed community Steiner playgroup once a week for under 8s. But again, I'm working with the already converted, the privileged who can choose not to be part of the school system. How do I find a space for my child to have their needs met of being outschooled, as they call it, not just being home educated by the parents, but also not to be schooled? Is this even an option where we live in 2026? What will we do next?